All right. This is week 3, and this is really going to be the last week I have stuff to share with you, and hopefully next week we'll have some things to share with each other. I sent today an email with some of the materials that I shared last week with you. If you want to, you can print that out. You can also go to the church website, click on Hominy Online, and I'll put those things there too, in case you lose that and want to try to come back to it later on.
Sounds good.
So this week, there we go. Week 3, we're going to be talking about shaping our own statements of faith. And last week, you might remember, we talked about group faith statements, creeds, and confessions, and that they were trying to answer questions that came up from some kind of conflict or controversy, and they were trying to create common ground for everybody who was left to connect and for them to be able to identify with each other. We also talked about, and I don't know if I used this word, but I think it's a good one, that they try to comprehensively address issues that the group feels are most important for their time and place. They try to cover all the bases, and that's why they're so long. And they also try to purposefully ignore things that they don't agree on. You know, if there's something they can't agree on, they just didn't put it in there because they were trying to write down, particularly for Baptists, some basic beliefs that everybody who was in that group could agree on. And we talked a little bit about some of the questions that those faith statements try to answer. You talk about God and people, what Jesus has done, how we learn about God, Bible, the church, what does God want us to do, and what about heaven and things that happen when we die. So this week we're going to look at personal faith statements. And I think a good way to think about personal faith statements is that they're trying to answer what parts of the faith, everything that all Christians believe, what parts of the faith form the core of my personal faith. I believe all that, but some of it's more important to me than other parts. And so what are those parts that are really the core of what I believe and what keeps me going and what I trust in to provide guidance and direction for my life? There are some folks who would really zero in on what they believe about creation because that's very important to them. I've known people, they're very important. They really are important about who God is and how the Trinity works and the Father, Son, and the Spirit and all that. That's very important to them. Other people, that's not so important. So in your personal faith statement, you get to pick and choose those things that are most important to you. Some things that personal faith statements don't have to be. You don't have to resolve the thorny theological issues. You don't have to figure out, how the Trinity works. That you can just say, I believe in the Trinity, and that's like, whatever, if that's important to you. Unless it's very, very important to you. But you don't have to resolve the big theological issues. The nice thing about a personal faith statement is you don't have to compromise with somebody else's view. This is your personal statement. So you don't have to word it in such a way that 2 or 3 people can agree on it, or 100. This is what you believe. You don't have to cover everything. You're not trying to come up with a comprehensive list of all the things that Christians believe. You're just focusing on the things that are important to you. And you don't have to use formal theological language, church language, those kinds of, they were very precise about what words they chose because every word meant something. So they were very careful about what words they chose. You don't have to worry about using formal language. Have it sound like you. It shouldn't sound like somebody else. It should sound like you.
And so many words could mean different things. I mean, same
right.
thing. You could have one word that means blah, blah, blah.
Yeah. And you don't have to define that. You don't have to work out all the theological language. Just choose the words that mean something to you. Some other advice that I read about personal faith statements. Don't start by how long does it have to be. Do you remember asking your English teacher that first thing? You know, how long does it have to be?
Yeah.
Don't worry about trying to get it to a certain length. The answer is however long it is for you. Now, I'll give you a little bit of advice. You may want to try to keep under 300 words because that forces you to make some choices about what you want to include and what's most important. To give you an idea, my little steering column in the newsletter is between 200 and 300 words. Usually I try to keep it closer to 200, but it's almost never over 300. So, and that's usually will fit on a page thereabouts, depending on how big you write or type or however you want to do it. But don't go on and on and on and on. And you don't have to present a 6-page thesis or anything like that. You're saying
the shorter it is in the newsletter, the more interested you are in reading it.
That's right. If people open up and there's an article that's 3 pages long, they don't read it.
That's true.
We know that.
Normally, if it's that, you just read the first paragraph.
There you go.
I've got it now.
You got it. That's good. That's good. A second piece of advice is be honest. Don't worry about saying the right thing or the wrong thing. You know, this is not for grade, and I'm not going to correct you, and we're not going to correct each other. It's just a way to express yourself and try to put it down on paper so you can see it. And you don't have to be worried about what anybody's going to say or think about what you say.
This will all be in what you sent, right?
Yeah. I'm going to send you another thing tonight that's got this in.
But I'd like to see this too.
Okay. I thought about that, and I couldn't get it all down in there in one document today. So I'm going to give it to you tonight after I get done.
Sounds good.
Good. Third suggestion is it might be helpful to share a story, and maybe even start with a story if you want, that helps kind of show your faith in a nutshell. You know, if there's a story that something that happened in your life, that story has shaped everything about your faith, then that may be more important than listing off a list of things you believe. So if there's a story that helps illustrate what your faith is all about or what shaped your faith, that could be very helpful. I know I think I've told it in sermons and Sunday school classes. My mother, I have a copy of her testimony that she gave at a meeting one time. And the first line of it is, God is the only Father I ever knew. With that, in a nutshell, shapes everything that she believes. And she goes on to talk about why that's so and what that meant to her, that she didn't have a father, you know, but her relationship to God was all about how God was her father. So that kind of thing. It could be just that short, just a statement. You don't have to go into all the details. But if there's some part of your experience that explains it all for you, you may want to include that. It may be helpful for you to put it in terms of how your faith and your view of God, how it's changed. You know, it may be that you grew up with one set of beliefs and now you have a different set of beliefs. And why is that? You know, that may be a very, very helpful way if you're trying to share this with someone else to help them understand what your beliefs are. You know, this is something that's really drastically changed for me. I heard a pastor talk yesterday in a meeting. Now, he grew up in a church where women were not allowed to do anything. And when he went off to school and went to other churches, he saw that there were women deacons, and there were women who led in worship and women who taught in Sunday school and all that. And that changed his whole outlook about who could do what in church. So how your beliefs have changed could be a helpful way to put things down. And then this is something that we're bad about. Refrain from saying what you do not believe. Yeah. Don't spend time talking about what other people believe and how you don't believe that. You know,
No.
Not helpful. Focus on what you believe and what's important to you. And that way you don't get in when you're sharing that with someone and you bump into somebody and they believe one of those things that you don't believe in. You won't lose that opportunity to talk. Because, you know, they say, oh, well, you know, they're starting off with what I believe in and they don't believe in it. So we don't have anything in common. So try to avoid talking about what you don't believe in. All right, this is for creative folks. Some folks just cannot write sentences. I mean, that's just not what they do. So some folks will do it in a poem form. They'll write it as a song. Some folks have written as like a story, like a children's story. I don't know if any of you are into art. Some people have created a piece of art. Vaughty,
Yeah.
I've even seen a quilt. I've seen a quilt that was somebody's testimony.
Really?
Yeah. So if you decide to do that, you don't have to make the quilt in 1 week. So what you might do for our purposes, if you decide to do something creative, is kind of describe what you would do and what the different pieces of it would mean.
Sounds good.
So there are different creative ways that you can make a personal faith statement. All right, let's see before I go to that. Any questions so far? We're good? All right. Now, I don't know if we didn't have this when I was a kid, but and you may not either. But now, when kids are in school and they're asked to write something, they get what they call prompts, which is the clues or the topics that they want to write about, and they can do it any way they want to, but it's really to help them start thinking. So you're not looking at a blank page when you start. Is really what it's about. So here are some prompts. You do not have to use any of these or all of. You can use all of them, but I'm going to give you a sheet that's got these on there, so that you don't have to start with a blank page. Because sometimes a blank page is the hardest thing in the world to do anything with. So here are some of the prompts. You know, it could be, I believe God. I believe God is good. I believe God loves everybody. Whatever you believe about who God is and what God is like. I believe the world, you know, I believe the world is God's creation. I believe the world is a dark and nasty place. I believe the world is a wonderful place full of glory. You know, what you think about the world can really shape a lot of other things. And then these next two, you can either make it very personal. I believe I need God because, or if it's something you think that applies to everybody, you could say, I believe people need God because. Same thing with the next one. I believe what Jesus did for me or does for me. Or you could say, I believe what Jesus did or does for everybody is such and such. And the does could talk about, you know, what he did when he was alive. You know, he died on the cross. He rose again. He saved us from our sins, those kinds of things. But you also may want to talk about what he does right now for you. I believe to follow Jesus means to, you know, what do you do to follow Jesus? You know, different people think different things about that. You know, if you're from a Catholic tradition, part of that is you go to Mass. period. That's one of the things you do. And you take communion on a regular basis. That's not as a big a deal for us, but there are different things. What do we believe it means to follow Jesus? And then if you need some more, you could if what the Bible is very important to you, you could talk about what you believe about the Bible. You could talk about, I believe that the church, church is a family, or I believe that church is very important, or I believe you don't have to go to church. What do you believe about the church in your personal faith? And then we mentioned, what happens when you die? I believe when I die, this is what's going to happen. Or I don't know what's going to happen when I die, but I believe that, God's going to take care of me. You don't have to use all of these. You don't have to use any of these, but I think it's helpful to have something, to prompt your thinking. And you may decide, one of these has 3 or 4 parts for you that are real important. So you want to spend your time there. Someone who's grown up in the church has a very different view of how important it is, or may have a very different view than somebody who's just come to the faith. And it may be that the person who's just come to faith, it feels much more strongly about it. You don't know. But we can have different views about these different aspects. Questions about that? We're going to be done. All right. I want to close with a piece of a video of a song. We've done questions. This is called "You Say," and I like this because it's a very personal faith statement, and she is talking to God about what God says to her and about her. So it's a good piece, and I think I'm all set to hit play. So wave your hands if you can't hear it, okay?
Oh, isn't that Adele that sings that?
It sounds like Adele.
It's been on the chart. Maybe Adele has sung it too then, because they sound very similar.
She sounds very much like Adele. Her name is Lauren Daigle.
Daigle. Okay, I'm going to see. I'll check it and just let you know. I'll send you a text and say, yeah. Because I heard that song and I always think of a love song, but now that you mention it about God, it is. It's singing the words and all that.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Good.
It's beautiful.
What else do y'all think did that stir up for you?
Well, Paul, when you were talking about writing and not just a little snippet, something, I thought, I don't know if I've ever told this in your presence or anybody else's, but when I was a little girl, back during the war, we lived in Maryville, Tennessee, Alcoa actually, and Daddy worked at the plant, at the aluminum plant, whatever it is. Anyway, it was Valentine's Day, or it was coming up, and I wanted a store-bought Valentine just for my teacher. I could draw for other, for my friends and so forth, but I wanted to give my teacher a ball for Valentine. And Daddy said, I'll look, but he said, I don't know whether there are any or not, So I just got behind our garage. I just barely could crawl in there because of the weeds and the thing. And I prayed, Lord, please, Lord, let me have just one Valentine for my teacher. And It wasn't a half an hour till my next door neighbor, my little friend, she and I were in the same grade. She came down, she said, Gail, I've got 6 Valentines left over. Do you want them? Now, you think that didn't strengthen my faith?
Yeah. Definitely. Definitely. Those are the kinds of stories that it's a short story, but it really affected what you believe and how God answers prayer and a lot of things.
Yeah, and every time I get really down and think, Lord, do you listen? You know.
Yeah.
I that comes to mind a lot of times. And then, of course, the other time that I thought that God really had forgotten me was the last back surgery I had, because the surgeon was out of town. I was laying over there in the hall, not in a room, in the hall. And I kept praying, Lord, have you forgotten me? And he sent a man from, where was he from? Charlotte was covering. He was covering for my surgeon while he was there. And he said, I can do this. That's all I do all day long. Is back surgery. And so I just felt like God had sent Dr. Healy to take care of me.
Yeah.
So anyway, there you go.
There we go. Thank you for sharing those, Gail. Anything else before we go tonight?
Well, that song, the young lady that was singing, do you think that she was singing from her heart because she felt like maybe God didn't listen to her all the time? Or do you think she was trying to prove herself to God? Or do you feel like that she wasn't getting enough attention from God's people to come to her or something? It made me question some of that, it's the wording.
I think part of it was that she was coming from a place where she felt like she was all alone, that she had no worth. And she had finally realized that God was telling her she was not alone.
That's right.
She had worth.
Yeah.
And one of the interesting things, when I first saw that, I was thinking, all right, because, they make choices about how they film these things.
I know.
And she's all alone in the house. And I got to thinking, that's when we get low and we begin to think that we're all by ourselves. And that we're not worth anything, and that God doesn't love us, nobody loves us. That's when that happens. And so I think it's good that starts out, she's all by herself.
Yeah.
And then she comes to this, she remembers the things that God has told her about her.
Right.
That she is valuable, that she's not alone, that she has worth. And I think it's a well done piece.
And she's outside.
And then she's outside.
Yeah,
she goes out and she opens up and she feels like she's right there with God.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that I think all of us feel that sometimes, but we know we've got friends that we can check in with, and they check in with us, and that makes us feel like we're cared about.
Yeah.
Because that's how God cares for us, is through our loved ones and our friends. Yeah.
That is, in my opinion, is what we're supposed to be, is to take care of other people. That's our
right.
That's our job. Yeah.
That's why we're there.
Yeah. Right.